Today, we are delving into a story that is completely absurd. It's the case of something called lethal teleportation, and what seems to be the only reported case of this occurring.
So today's sponsor is the channel. If you would like to be oh so generous and donate a super thanks to the channel, because YouTube doesn't always support the type of content that I'm talking about, so help me make this channel funded for you, by you. Take that like button, donate it to charity, and when you realize you added too many zeros at the end, cancel that shit. Take all your money back. Fuck charity. I'm kidding. It's October 5th, 2017, and a man with a name that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, so we're going to call him Teke. Now this story starts off rather normal and usual, and sort of diverts into a strange and unexplainable ending. The person in question, Teke, is undergoing some sort of abdominal surgery. The surgery seemed to be going normal as planned, and after doctors had finished patching him up, he was routinely placed in another room where he could undergo the recovery process. Teke lived in a suburb based in Stellenbosch. He was a father of 6, and he was already relatively old leading up to this point. About 61 when he went in to have abdominal surgery. Now this sort of surgery would make it so that Teke was unable to walk. During the entire recovery process, he wouldn't be able to get up and get his own things. He wasn't even able to use the bathroom on his own. So after being moved to a secluded room in the hospital, a nurse was tasked to take care of him as he was undergoing the recovery process. And what's strange about this instance is that the nurse, as she's tending to him, she's keeping a close eye on him as he's someone who would rather do things on his own. So she's really trying to make sure that he's not getting up and moving around. And so she's paying very close attention. Every time she leaves the room, she's actually watching from outside to make sure he's not doing anything that he's not supposed to be doing. They want to ensure his safety and his full recovery. This nurse is basically making his every move for him. And there's not a lot of whole information that is available about what happens next. Only a few hours after undergoing surgery, as the nurse has just brought him some food and he has laid down to rest, she leaves the room to retrieve some fresh linens for the bed. And now, after a short, undisclosed amount of time, maybe a few minutes or even less seconds, the nurse turns around and looks back into the room, and she doesn't see Teke laying on the bed. Her first assumption is this man, he's old, but he's very mobile, so he's just trying to get around and do something. But she looks every corner of the room. She's sort of panning around the room. She sees no signs of Teke. Not one. The bed is sort of ruffled, as if, he got up. Teke wasn't connected to a whole lot on the bed, so he did have mobility. It's just that when she looked back at the bed, she realized that it looked like no one had even been lying there. And so she assumes that he probably had to use the restroom, which is sort of connected onto the room. So she ran in there and checked all the corners and in the shower and everything, and he was nowhere. He wasn't anywhere to be found. He seemingly disappeared. Now, I'm not going to say that, but it seems that he's gone. And her next thought that jumps into her head is that, oh, he jumped out the window. He just left the hospital. He felt fine, so he just thought that he was okay, and he's just tired of being bedridden, so he jumped out the window and left. But the windows weren't open. You really couldn't open them from the inside that way. You weren't able to basically take out the screen and leave the hospital. It wasn't built like that. Now, what happens next actually adds a bit of speculation onto what happened to Teke in this instance, because the hospital not only doesn't inform the family on what happened to their loved one, they don't even tell everyone in the hospital. The nurse doesn't even inform the entire hospital that Teke has gone missing, that they actually have a missing patient in here. So they're trying to save themselves, keep from getting in trouble basically for losing a patient like entirely. And so they sort of have a quiet search, and for the first 2 days of him being missing, there is no information released outside of that hospital, not even that quadrant of the hospital. They basically kept it to themselves the entire time until it became a more pressing issue. But on October 7th, the family finally receives a call from the hospital, and it's not the call that they were expecting at all. The family was expecting some sort of information in order to go pick him up. When it comes to these situations, they don't want a lot of people visiting and going in and out of the hospital. So his family members assumed that he is just lying in bed this entire time. And when the hospital finally calls them, they ask the family if he is home. And they're obviously confused about this entire situation because he hasn't been seen, and they thought he was there lying in that bed. And you can imagine this sort of conversation. You believe that your loved one is at the hospital, and the staff keeps responding and telling you, no, he's home, he had left. And then you keep on insisting, no, he's at the hospital. But they're not giving up any information on what actually happened. They just keep saying, well, he's not here, so we're just trying to make sure where he's at. And then the family just rushes to the hospital, understandably, because like, where the hell is he? The family rushes to the hospital and they search the surrounding area, and they're not finding any signs of him. Nothing. They've asked everybody at the hospital, and whether people are sort of keeping it to themselves in order to not get in trouble, they are acting like they haven't seen him this entire time. Some even saying that they don't even recognize the man. They finally come around to confronting the nurse that initially left the room to retrieve some linens, and she had said that she had last seen him at 5:15 a.m. But this was on October 5th, and nothing was reported to the family until October 7th. So the very next day, the family goes and they get the police, and they bring the police to help search for Teke. So for 2 full weeks, Teke is basically become a missing person. And a lot of people assume maybe he was given drugs that he wasn't used to, and they made him delirious, and somehow he managed to just walk past everyone in the hospital and leave, and he could be dead, in danger. They're not really understanding where he could have gone. Until October 20th, some information finally surfaced. A group of workers doing electrical renovations had gone up into the ceilings of the hospital, and they were making sure that all the wiring was operational. And as they are climbing through, this was a sort of a week project, and on the very last day of them doing their work, and this area that they were finishing up this work was back in a far corner that was secluded in the hospital. This was a spot where a lot of people didn't generally go. Any of the hospital staff didn't typically go into this area of the hospital because there was just more or less where the air conditioning systems were and where all the electrical work was usually done. So there is a lot of dust buildup and all this gunk back here, and mainly that's what the workers were also there for, was to make sure everything was cleaned out and working properly. One of the workers realizes that some of the light systems aren't working properly. The worker climbs to the top of the ladder and he shifts around one of those square ceiling tiles and he pushes it over to the side. And as he's climbing up, a waft of the worst smell he has ever experienced just hits his nostrils, right? And he assumes it's a dead animal and assumes that there has been an animal living in the ceiling which is causing all the issues. And as he's climbing up, he looks off into the corner and he shines his flashlight into this very dark, damp corner where a lot of leaking has been happening, and there's a hole to the outside. So he's already looking and seeing like, well, this is probably where like the animals are getting in. But then he pans over to the right a little and he sees a dead body. And it's Teke's dead body. All the way up in the ceiling at a different part of the hospital that is nowhere near the recovery room. As the staff figures this out, they all seem baffled as to how he got there. Generally, getting to this spot is only for workers. You would need the equipment to get to where he was. And not saying that he was a frail old man, but an old man climbing up into the ceiling and presumably dying from whatever he had going on, bleeding out, didn't make any sense at all. Oh, we don't know what's going on. In regards to South Africa, I'm not really sure there's a lot of murder cases happening like this. And so what's even more baffling than where they found him, I think, is they don't contact the family for a solid week as to deal with the regards of this matter. They don't call them for a whole week. So on October 27th, the family is finally notified of what happened. And now Teke's brother, who is overwhelmed with the idea that he now has to bury his brother, assumed this entire time that he was okay and he was recovering because the hospital had not notified them of anything this entire time. And so the hospital performs an autopsy on his dead body, and they report that nothing had come from the abdominal surgery, and nothing had come from natural causes. And then now they're also saying he was dead before he was in the ceiling, as if somebody had placed him there. Now, obviously, with all the the sheer vagueness of how everyone has reported on the situation, it all points to somebody wanting him dead, or he was murdered, or there was actual complications with the surgery and they just wanted to hide it because of somebody's reputation in the hospital. But another theory was that given the amount of time, trusting the nurse, given the amount of time, it seems that Teke could have possibly teleported. Now, of course, I'm skeptical of this, but there seems to be no other explanation as to how his body got from one end of the hospital to the other, unless all of this is being hidden by the entire hospital. Now, I tried to read up on some theories of lethal teleportation as though he's being teleported through space and time and somehow he just died. But there is no other cases of this, so I don't think it's true. But I'd like to hear what you think about this story. And do you think he was murdered? Do you think that he had complications during surgery and was delirious from some sort of drugs, experimental drugs they were giving him, and somehow he ended up in the ceiling? Or did somebody kill him? Did the nurse kill him? Did his family want him dead? And this is just a strange way of covering it up. I'm not sure, but I don't think that it truly is lethal teleportation as some spots on the internet have indicated.